Hi, hello, I am Serena Saint-Sinclair, and welcome to the Pomegranate Path. Today we have a really special episode. I am interviewing Courtney Weber, who is the author of Hekate, and she has a bunch of other fabulous books. Courtney has other works like Tarot for One, The Morrigan, and Sacred Tears, which I currently just finished. It was a fantastic book, and for Justin, the Witch of Enchantment's Discord, she actually came on to talk to everybody about the book for the book club. That is on his channel underneath his channel membership. If you can, go over and check that out. There are other deities that are characters within this myth of the Homeric hymn to Demeter, and while Persephone is in the underworld, we actually don't really know what's going on with her. So, in order to kind of honor the myth, I felt like we should talk about some of the other characters. We talked to Jess Ora about Demeter, Jamie Wagner about Hades, and today we're going to talk to Courtney Weber about Hecate, goddess of liminal spaces, crossroads, and other mysteries. Hecate really appears at this pivotal point in the myth, where she bears witness to Persephone's descent, not directly, but she hears her cries. And then later, she approaches Demeter and helps her actually find Persephone, locate her, by guiding her to Helios, getting the answer from the sun god what exactly happened to Persephone and where is she at. If you would like to continue your support and seeing more episodes, please like, subscribe, and comment, share, whatever you are capable of doing. It really helps keep the sacred work flowing. I'm joined today by Courtney Weber. Thank you so much for coming on to my channel.
Oh, thanks, Serena. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, so I actually saw you present this summer at Mystic South, and you did such a fantastic job. I went
Thank
to both of your
you.
presentations, and
Thank you.
yeah, I love your work, and also seeing you present in person and your personality attached to everything was really impressive. So I'm honored to have you here right now.
Thank you, Serena.
As you know, I'm working on a series called The Pomegranate Path, and today I really wanted to focus on Hecate's relationship with Persephone, and who else to better ask than
My name is Courtney Weber. I've been practicing witchcraft in a variety of different ways, probably my whole life, but most officially for almost 25 years now, because that's what that number is absolutely terrifying. But and I am the author of a number of books on different goddesses connected with witchcraft, and probably best known for my Hecate book. And I wrote it with the exploration of her as a goddess of witches. When I started writing it, it was she's so multifaceted and textured and has so much going on that I couldn't pick one specific thread. So I chose as the goddess of witches. And I think that that was something that really resonated with a lot of people, because not only is she a goddess of magic and prophecy, just her whole identity really matches up with the way a lot of people who identify as witches do, and that they like deliberately, walking against the grain, choosing a different path than like-minded others. Hecate was a Titan, so she was a primordial force of nature, but she helped overthrow the Titans and helped put her nephew in power, who became the king of the Olympus gods. But while all the gods were moving to Olympus, she said no thank you, and she moved into a cave in the woods. And because she still is going to continue to do things her own way. And when no one would help Demeter find her missing daughter, Hecate stepped up and said, I think I know where she's at, and I'm going to help you. And she did help Demeter find her daughter. And then she also helped Persephone when she was in the underworld. So it's really remarkable. And I see that play out in the lives of a lot of witches who do, question the dominant paradigm, who do walk and say, I'm going to do this differently. And there's fear around that, but there's also freedom. And Hecate is, I think it makes sense that she is beloved by so many modern witches.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I'm curious in your opinion on this. I feel like I've recently seen a resurgence of a bunch of people working with her. I feel like
Hmm.
she's getting popular right now. Do you agree with that? Or since you've been in the sphere a lot longer than I have, I'm curious on your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's been such, looking back over the last couple decades, when I first entered into witchcraft, there was a real desire to promote the concept of love and light, and really identifying with goddesses that have a reputation. I say reputation, not necessarily identity, reputation of being kind. I think that was coming out of probably the early days of public witchcraft and Wicca, where it was really important to, as kind of more of a PR statement, is to say we're here to be kind, we're here to be nice, and to not elicit fear. And so there certainly was purpose to that. There was, I mean, the early 2000s were a time that was pretty war thumping. There was a lot of pressure, at least, I mean, speaking from an American perspective, and I know you probably have a global audience, so I just want to make that clear. But there was a lot of like chest pounding and going to war, and war was the way to go. And if you stood against that, then you were somehow, you were part of the problem. And so,
Yeah.
which is, I think that there was a sense of rebellion with actually saying we're choosing this path of peace and kindness when there's so much that is unkind and warfaring right now. But then I think that as time went on, and there's certain powers that be that got even more toxic and more powerful and more oppressive, that there was a need to stop playing nice and starting to embrace goddesses that have a more frightening reputation. And that I think was also because we started to live in more frightening times, and it just was, there was a call toward, reaching out to more frightening goddesses. And I think Hecate is, whether this is conscious or not, on behalf of the people that reach out to her, she is one that does light the way in dark times. She did that for Persephone, and she does that for others. She did that for Demeter, and she's no, she's associated with the moon. And one of the main reasons for it is the moon is the light on a dark night. Um, and so there's a real attraction to her, I think, because of her rumors of being dark and of, being a goddess of scary things. But when you really look at her, she's a goddess of exploring and becoming less afraid of the things that are scary. So, and because she's a goddess of the crossroads, and we're at a period where humanity is at a crossroads, it continues to make sense to me why people are reaching out to her in the way that they do. And I think in the United States, there is a natural comfort that comes with the Greek pantheon.
Hmm.
Our a lot of our government structures have, like our older ones especially, have imagery that is resonant with some of the gods of ancient Greece, and I think that that was deliberate on behalf of the original organizers. I don't want to say founding fathers, I don't think that's really fair, but
Yeah.
some of this country, because they were trying to build a secular nation, but they didn't, I think they didn't want to abandon, the spirit fully. So there was this idea of bringing in these Greek gods, and also probably as a nod to Greek as being one of, not the birthplace of democracy. Democracy in Greece certainly influenced the democracy of the United States, but it was not the only place in the old world or anywhere that practiced democracy. I want to make that very clear. I think sometimes we tend to get a little siloed in that thinking. It was around before ancient Greece and other places. It's been around since ancient Greece in many places, and certainly many of the ways that the original nations of this land practiced their own governments certainly had an influence on the way that this government practices. But I think so just having this imagery in the background of these different Greek gods, I think lends to a certain level of comfort. And on a spiritual level, whether or not these original architects realized that, they were building temples to the ancient Greek gods here in North America. So I think that the Greek gods have a plenty of space to roam around on this
Yeah.
on this foreign land. So that's where I see it. And also Hecate herself has a very, very broad and diverse origin. She was considered by the ancient Greeks to be a foreign goddess. She came, they literally called her the one who comes from afar, and
Yeah.
evidence of her worship is found in the Middle East and in Northern Africa. And so certainly she had her own very diverse set of origins, which means she's going to collect a very diverse set of people, even, 5,000 years after she was potentially first worshipped, and possibly even older than that. So, but I think a lot more of it is about the time that we're in. We have there's this ever growing presence of white nationalism that is really, pushing some kind of Christian theocracy on this country. And so I think that there is a natural tendency among those who don't want that to be looking for something else. And Hecate, with her history of overthrowing oppressive powers, even if it's the one that she came from, and also being, then that makes sense to me, if that answers your question.
Yes, that definitely answers my question.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like one of the things that's really fascinating about your answer is I don't think I thought of it fully in the full context of what is happening currently in, wherever you live and the way in which that reflects who we are working with and what we are doing. This love and light thing, I was thinking of it more as a you don't understand, but now I realize it was something that was needed versus it wasn't. Does that make sense? I was like, oh, they're not
100%.
as developed in order to hold multiple truths, but instead it's like, no, that is what's needed at the time and a reflection of the way that society was set up. And, that's you're going to most people are going to use their spiritual beliefs in order to kind of compensate for something that they need in the moment.
And they always have. I mean, that's when we look at histories of God, especially these very old ones, they have these very contradictory attributes. So you have Hecate, who is a goddess in certain myths, or you see her reflected in poetry, or early occult doctrines. When I say early occult, I mean they're several thousand years old, as being someone who's helps with birth and helps with nurturing those who are vulnerable, and helps guide the souls to enlightenment. And then you also see her in other aspects as a goddess of demons, and who could basically hire souls to come and unleash disease on whole villages, and that she was someone not to be messed with. It's very easy for us modern day people to just say, oh, well, that was just Christian propaganda. And there was certainly some of that. But what it really is, when you see a goddess that has so many complicated, or so many seemingly contradictory attributes, it's because the people experience different things. So in one century, maybe the crops were doing really well, and the babies were surviving, and people were prospering, and they had enough privilege and luxury to be able to ponder the mysteries of the universe and how God could help them become, a more conscious being. But then in the next century, there's war, and there's famine, and there's disease. And so then the gods become the enemy. So whenever we see these myths where the gods do something awful, it's because we're looking at a time period in which humanity experienced something awful. I mean, almost every culture out there has an origin story of a great flood, which can probably be attributed to the end of the last ice age, when the glaciers were melting and there were a lot of great floods. And so in many of these stories, gods were punishing people for one reason or another. Not all, everybody, it's certainly not a monolith, but that's a very common story of gods punish people by sending them a flood. And it's like, how can that be the same God that is also the one who is encouraging the crops to grow? Well, it's because there was a time period in which floods were annihilating whole peoples, likely. But then there was a time when the floods receded, and it allowed new crops to grow because of differences in the soil. And then all of a sudden, well, maybe God's not so bad after all.
Hmm.
So that's what I think it's really important to remember. And then we do the same thing now. Right now, Hecate may be more about darkness and power, because right now many of us feel like we are fighting darkness. And then there may be and it's just kind of like, I talked about this in the class I think you probably heard about. When you walk into a New Age store, you typically see statues of a very serene, pregnant goddess, and she's very happy and she's very calm, and you just get the sense that she's going to give you whatever you need. And that's not really a reflection of who the earth goddess has been for thousands of years. That's
Yeah.
who she is to a very specific set of people right now, those people being many folks in the Western world, because we have technology that allows our agriculture to produce actually more food than we could possibly consume. And people that are going hungry are not going hungry because there's no food. They're going hungry because of economic inequality. Certainly that's not true everywhere in the world, but because we are used to the earth providing everything that we need whenever we want it, we naturally then perhaps see our earth goddess as a kind, ever-giving goddess who gives us whatever we want whenever we want it.
Mm.
Um, and that's really not been the case for thousands of years, when it was not so easy to get food in most parts of the world. And the goddess was not, the fertility earth goddess was not so kind and generous, and that she could be very fickle and cruel, but she could also be very giving depending on her mood. So gods have always been reflections of human experience, and they still are. That doesn't make them any less real or any less cognizant. It's just far more complicated than I think we could ever really understand.
Are you a hard polytheist?
I actually don't believe in the idea of hard polytheist and soft polytheist.
Oh,
I,
can
I
we?
think those,
I know we're going off the script, but can you tell me about that?
yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing. This idea of there are hard polytheists and soft polytheists is a pretty American and frankly kind of colonized mentality. And it's
Okay.
really recent in that there are only, that what it basically suggests is there is only two ways to view the gods. And the truth is, it's kind of like if you go into a forest and say there are plants and there are animals. Okay. Well, then where do fungi fit in? Okay. And would you consider a slug the same as a fox? Okay. What about beetles? Are those plants or are those animals? Okay. Well, now you have insects, but then you have insects that fly and insects that crawl. What about worms? You have a very diverse ecosystem of plant and marine life, plant life, animal life, just basically of life. And so it really makes no sense to just cut them into two categories. In different parts of the world, gods don't just fall into hard or soft. It really depends on the culture. There may be some cultures in which the gods are very specific, and like this god is completely separate from this goddess. And then you find some where they're like, yeah, they're different, but they're also kind of the same. And then, of course, you may find that there are even some other cultures where it's like, you know, it all goes back to one source, but they wear different masks. There is no, I think it's limiting to then to say someone's a hard polytheist or a soft polytheist. If I were to basically label myself as something like that, I'd say I'm an agnostic polytheist. I do believe in the deities, but I also understand that I'm never going to understand them. Because as soon as I start to then want to grasp hold of, okay, Hekate is always going to be in very specific, she is never going to have any connections with any of the other Greek deities. For example, she has some connections in some traditions with Selena and gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Oh, embarrassing, I'm drawing a blank there. Would it be Artemis? Yeah, I think it'd be Selena and Artemis and Hecate. And then if somebody was saying, well, a soft polytheist would say that all three of those goddesses are the same wearing different masks. And a hard polytheist would say, well, those are all three separate. And my response would be, okay, but in what context? Right? Because,
Right.
that there may be times when they do kind of come together, and there may be times when they're super separate. Um, and there's some myths in which she's not associated with really the moon at all. And then there
Mhm.
are some concepts in which she is only the dark moon. Like, it's not really reasonable, and it's really limiting just to say that, she is only this way and she's never any other way. And so I don't really ascribe to the idea of hard or soft polytheism, and that it's a thing to pick. I think it's a thing to respect, is what it is. Because if I were to, the risk with people that there's risks, I think, with both. There are risks with people who who embrace the idea of what you describe as soft polytheism, which is like all gods are one. And so that means that I could walk into any tradition, they're all the same. So I would be giving myself permission to say, walk into a Yoruba practice and say, well, all gods are one. So I'm going to start doing these practices without really understanding them because I can. When there is a cultural legacy of initiation that is required for people in order to do these practices that has been preserved through history and oppression, and that needs to be respected. Um, and then I think sometimes it can be kind of limiting when someone says, "Well, Aphrodite and Venus are the same." Okay, well, there's elements of this two goddesses mythologies that are a little bit different. So if we kind of mash them together, we're not really seeing their whole picture. But the same challenges with people that tend to embrace more hard polytheism, as I would say, Aphrodite and Venus are never the same. They are completely different gods and goddesses. And if you even consider, you know, merging them together, then you're not really either respecting them or you're not really having a powerful worship. But then I think that there's some missing piece there in saying, okay, well, where are they in common and why are they in common? And what do these two goddesses have in common that we can learn about ourselves? So I think that it's a mistake when people demand that someone choose one or the other. And I've been accused of being all of the above. And I'm always like, I really don't think I think it's a waste of time. And I also think it's really limiting to then label something hard or soft because it's an ecosystem and all of these situations are unique. It just comes back to the forest. So there are plants and there are animals. Okay, well then I need you to tell me about the microorganisms in the water that multiply on their own. Where do they fit in? No, like that's right. It's like that's, you're really limiting yourself and what the potential could be. But I think that above all these things, leaving the potential open, that there's a lot we don't understand, we don't know, while also leaving respect for the people that have been preserving specific traditions and specific ways through history and oppression. That needs to be respected, even if deep down you're like, I do believe that they're all the same, but it's the approach to these specific avenues to the divine is what I need to respect. All right. So that's where I feel about it.
Yeah, I feel like that leads into a question that I had for you, and I feel like you kind of answered it, but I would love for you to elaborate. Despite the Mother Maiden Crone structure being Hecate's original antiquated, not being Hecate's original antiquated image, I like the structure a lot and a lot in how I see Persephone because I work with Persephone, obviously, and Hecate kind of being two sides of the same coin, and Persephone kind of being embodiment of descent of self, and Hecate being the one who holds space, like a wise crone would do, and for descent, and then Demeter being the mother somewhere in there, and then kind of all being sometimes all three sides of the same deity, and then of course
Mhm.
they're separate. Um, what do you think about that? I want to hear your opinion on those roles.
I think that's the Maiden Mother Crone is I think it's just exactly like what you said. It's important to recognize its origin story and say this is not how it always was, but it is helpful to me now. That's great, right? And it doesn't have to always be the way it was always in order for it to be now. I mean, let's be honest. People used to sacrifice black puppies to Hecate, okay, thousands of years ago. Nobody should be doing that now. I don't care if that's authentic. No, 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 no. We
Yeah.
live in different times. We have different relationships with animals. We have different relationships with dogs, and we're not doing that, guys. So, and maybe coffee was not a thing that happened in ancient Greece, but I tell you what, Hecate asked me for a cup of black coffee periodically, and she gets it. That's not historically accurate to Hecate, but it is supportive of what I'm doing. So I think it's lovely. It's important. I think the recognition of this is a relatively new concept, but you know what? We're coming out of 2,000 years in which anything feminine was at the very least minimized and at worst was trying to annihilate it and kept
Mm.
silent. So having a spiritual structure that not only recognizes feminine people as sacred, but also recognizes aging as sacred and beautiful is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think it's a problem when people start taking, switching, just mentioning the Irish myths for a minute, about taking some of the Irish goddesses, which often appear in triplicate in Irish mythology, and squishing them into this model of Maiden Mother Crone, because that's just not really accurate to who they were.
Mhm.
It is a little more, I think, fits a little bit more with some of the Greek myths. I just still don't think it was 100% accurate to that. But it's kind of like you pointed out, is that Persephone, Demeter, and Hecate do seem to together represent this kind of, how do I say, feminine growth and feminine, taking care of one another. Things makes me think about when, I first had my daughter and she's just a little infant, and my mom would sit up with me all night and help me take care of her. So there's the three of us that are, basically working together to take care of stuff. And now I'm teaching my daughter how to take care of her Nana. And I say, okay, go bring Nana a napkin, go see if she help her with the groceries. And so it's, the kind of a creating a connection there. And sometimes I look at my niece. There's this picture of my mother when she was a little girl where she made this face that then when my sister was about that age, she made this very specific face. And then when I saw my niece sitting on the front porch one day making that specific face, that was just like showing to me this little elements of through the ages, this truth and this reality coming through. So I think it's wonderful when we recognize it for what it is. It's a relatively new concept. It does not belong in every single model of divine. It has somewhat of a reasonable footing alongside Hecate, may not be the original footing, and it's helping you. So that's great.
Your answers are so well thought out. You have so much information. I'm like trying to
Oh, and I
remember
talk in
everything I was.
circles. I know it's a pain in the butt.
No,
One of
no,
my
no.
family gatherings, they're like, get to the point, wrap it up. Because I'm like, blah, 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 blah.
No, I feel like I'm like, oh, I want to say this about that. I want to say this about that. And then by the time you get to the end, I'm like, I forgot everything I was going to say. I think that one thing that I have been thinking about when I have these conversations about the Mother Maiden Crone aspect is I also am Korean American, and the way that Korean people see elders and see crones is very different than an American mindset. So I've kind of started putting this like little idea together that when I talk to people like that and they really don't like the structure, it might be because it's not, relevant to their story or whatever. But I also think that it's also a reflection of how we see maybe our elders and the way that we see crone women and maybe think that I don't know. I think that some people just don't see it quite in the same way. Because to me, I'm like, if you call her crone, it is like the highest respect that you could ever put on anyone. Like that is like
Mhm.
the top tier. You are the wisest, you know the most, and you are, like you said, primordial. So for me, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. She's primordial. She is older than these titans, and she knows how to hold space. She knows how to witness, and she knows how to guide. And someone who is a true guide is someone who has been through it and recognizes that they cannot do the work for you, that they must hold space and watch you do it yourself, kind of like let you fail almost. And that's how I have interpreted Hecate and in this situation. But then some other people I talk to really hate that idea, and they're like, she's not a crone. It's unfair to put her in that that title, which is fine and fair if that's your opinion. But I also think it's maybe sometimes a reflection of how we see the crone image. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, typically in her, historically speaking, she was always shown as a young woman.
Hmm.
So that could have a lot more context to unpack. Is it because she's immortal that she never ages? Um, I mean, we have a lot to think, like a lot to that we don't know about why she was depicted the way she was. But like on the eight, like in the relics from ancient Greece, she was always a young woman. And maybe that's also as a way of showing that she was unmarried, right? So that the idea of a young woman is most likely to be unmarried in that culture in that time period. I'm just guessing. So historians that are listening, that may not be correct, but that's my guess, just from where we have to remember that the people looking at the art, like at art, the artistry, needed very specific images to not only talk about who these goddesses were, but also what they represented, because most people couldn't read. So they didn't have a book to go read on Hecate, or they couldn't even really usually read the inscriptions on the bottom. So it had to be like overcompensating for who she was supposed to be. So the idea of her always being young could have meant a lot of things. It could have meant because they say she never married, therefore she stays young, or that she was immortal, therefore she stays young. So that those are some things we need to be considering. That doesn't mean that she did not have the wisdom or the role of the crone, as you mentioned. It was a different way of looking at the divine than perhaps we would now. So I think there may be some of what you're saying, that there is a little bit of hesitancy in honoring the crone. I personally see it more in people trying to pigeonhole the gods as who they are and who they're not, without actually thinking about the context of the time and also the big questions that we have. And some people reject the idea of Maiden Mother Crone because it was first coined by a white dude in, I think it was Victorian times. And
Yeah.
so there's a tendency to want to reject that. And the Maiden Mother Crone, you know, imagery has done some damage to other, like, to other living cultures. The Irish, for example, it's not it idea of Maiden Mother Crone just did not really exist as part of the Irish mythos. And so when people try to bring that in, it takes away from the truth of what a goddess showing up in three meant to, to the context of Ireland. And that's not right. But I also do think that there could be something to that, of people saying, I don't show her as the crone. And maybe it's also the rejection of the idea of the witch being the quote unquote wicked old woman who cackles and does horrible things. And so there's more of that rejection. For me, I think that's beautiful if that's how people are embracing her, as like we're talking about, from your own heritage of someone to be the crone is the highest, most great honor that we could give someone. Therefore, I want to give this title to her. That's wonderful. And we don't know that wouldn't have been appropriate to, her origins when she was originally worshipped 5,000 years ago. That may have been perfectly appropriate. We haven't found anything that predicts her as being old, but that may not be because they don't consider her age as much as what did it look, if someone was shown to be old in artwork, did it show that they were close to dying? Did it show that they were ill? We don't really know what that symbolism meant.
Right. Yeah.
So
And now I'm curious, are there any deities that are depicted as old? Like, I feel like it's a
yeah,
whole rabbit hole I can go into.
I I think I think that there may have been some depictions of, was it Chronos or Father Time, something about the new year, like the changing of the year. I know I probably got some people who are out there screaming it, but that was like, um, that the god of the new year had two faces, one that was young, one that was old,
That
and the
makes
old
sense.
face represents the passing of the old year,
Hmm.
and the new face meant that. So it might have, so that's, um, like, I think, okay, it was Saturn, I believe, was like looking back as well as looking forward,
That makes a
right?
lot of sense. But
Yeah.
I feel like I don't really see typical imagery of any, especially like female. I feel like
Hmm.
deities, just because like we see these deities as like they're not mortal, so they don't suffer the same way that we do, and depicting them as old, right? I guess it depends on like if you see getting old as like being close to death, like you said, then they wouldn't depict her that way because she's not close to death because she's not dying. So I don't
Exactly.
know. That's such an interesting point and something to definitely for me to like reflect on and
Yeah.
continue in my studies.
But we have a
Uh,
different view of aging at this point.
yeah.
We have things that can help us. And also, like I said, you have inherited a beautiful cultural tradition that the woman who has lived that long is absolutely sacred and revered for that. And therefore we want to depict that. We want to honor it. So
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
so.
I feel like we could all just get into arguments about it all day long, and ultimately, if it's important to you and it helps you and it's not hurting anyone, then who cares?
Well, right, but also I think what you're doing is so important is that you recognize where it's coming from and you keep it in one specific. Um, I know I keep using the word context, but context is so, so, so very important when we're
Yes, of
doing this
course.
work.
Hmm.
You're bringing it in this context where it's like this is a very diverse goddess who has a lot of diverse people had a lot of different myths about her, and sometimes she shows up next to goddesses that are assumed to be quote unquote or representative of younger times in a person's life, and she tends to represent more of the guiding figure who's been around longer. And your way of saying, I give her this title because it is the greatest thing I could give her, that is beautiful, right? You're not going around and saying, well, Maiden Mother Crone belongs in every goddess figure. of
Yeah,
everyone to come across. You're
sure.
bringing it into a very specific context for a very specific reason. I think as long as we sit and think about where does it come from and does it have is it appropriate to bring it to this specific in this specific context? And
Hmm.
to me, when I hear what you're saying, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the validation.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I am always fascinated when I talk to people who work with these goddesses, what they think, because I get varying answers all over the place. And it's always such an interesting conversation for me.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
then there's some things about goddesses that are immortal or more like
mhm,
timeless that they represent. And that's where I think people get confused is when they see gods from different traditions, they tend to think they're the same because they have similar attributes. And I get this question a lot when people ask me about Santa Muerte. They say Santa Muerte seems to have a lot of similarities to Hecate. Are they connected? And I say probably not. However, what is common is people not under is that the seemingly random and mysterious choice of death, right? Death comes for people, it's going to come for everybody. And sometimes it comes for young, wonderful people who are
mhm.
nowhere near their prime. And then sometimes death leaves horrible people alone until the very, until they're very, very advanced in age. And then there's a whole bunch of other times in which it shows up, so it doesn't make sense. So the mysterious, seemingly indiscriminate nature of death it shows up in death figures in every single religion because it's a human curiosity. Why did they pick this person, not this person? Why does that happen? That is a human experience that we put on our gods.
Yeah.
And coming back to the Irish again, because this is one thing that I, discuss this with other folks that I, with some of the Irish scholars, and they've kind of said that that makes sense to them. That there is a goddess known as the Bive, who is sometimes seen alongside with the Morrigan and is sometimes thought to sometimes be the Morrigan. So again, it becomes a little bit like, nuance that sometimes they are the same and sometimes they're not. It really depends. And that's also just part of the legacy of Irish mythology is sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's neither. And sometimes it's something else altogether. But the Bive always shows up when powerful people are about to screw up. And she delivers a warning. And she is like, listen, if you continue your path this way, you will you'll be destroyed. And the people getting the message don't like to hear it. And so they normally will like bring their soldiers in to attack the Bive. But the Bive keeps speaking and says, I'm serious, you can attack me, and doesn't change the truth. If you keep going on this path, you will face annihilation. And they don't listen to her, and they keep going down the path and they face annihilation. And I was reading one of the myths of the Bible, and I was like, oh my God, our modern Bives are our climate scientists. They're standing up there giving warnings to people in power saying, if we do not change our ways, we are facing destruction. And climate scientists get their funding cut, they get death threats, they get their lives uphanded, and then many of them will just continue speaking out like, you can destroy me, but you can't destroy the truth. And the people in power don't listen. And that's a terrifying thing. And I think that's probably something that has happened a lot in human history is that you've got either a person or a group of people who are literally, and sometimes Bive is seen as an old woman, and sometimes she's seen as a young woman, which shows that sometimes the wisdom comes from the old or the wisdom comes from the young. That's my opinion. There may be other things, again, within that imagery that I'm not picking up on right now that may meant something else. But to me, that says the wisdom can come from someone who's been around for a long time and they get dismissed. The wisdom can come from the young who are looking at something and they see something that everybody else has missed. But it doesn't matter. When sometimes the wisdom is not taken seriously, then the people perish or the people suffer. And that is a human story, not just, and we're seeing it now and we saw it then.
Hmm.
So that's where I think people get a little confused instead of saying, well, these goddesses are the same because they have similar attributes. And I'm like, well, they have similar attributes because people everywhere have experienced wisdom being ignored and therefore people suffered. The experience of death that seems to be so indiscriminate and weird. It's this. That's what I think people miss instead of trying to find connections between them instead of saying this is just something that happens to people.
I think it's an interesting thing that you bring that up because after the pomegranate path is over in the spring, my next project I want to do is I think I've come up with the title. It's going to be Divine Daughters of Death, and I want
Mhm.
to do an interview series kind of similar to this, where I'm talking to different people who work with these deities, because I want to look at death goddesses in an array of cultures and see, one, how they're different and how they reflect the culture that they exist in and the time in which what they needed, and also all the similarities of like what do we understand about death, and what do we, how is that universal, and kind of comparing and contrasting the two, just because I think this exact topic is like super fascinating and a
Mhm.
reflection of humans and also like the human experience.
Hmm. Yeah.
So when it comes to Hecate and talking about the guide and psychopomp, the guide and psychopomp archetype that is put on her, sometimes the shadow or the shadow aspect of the psychopomp is that they are a bit of a trickster, or they can be confusing. And I'm curious if you see Hecate in that way, or do you see it illuminated in shadow aspects of her in your work with her?
Um, so I've not found her as a trickster in her mythology, but I have experienced her as a trickster in life.
Yeah, I think
So
that's more of a Hermes thing. He's a little bit more of a trickster, so
yeah, I think in mythology he tends to be known more as the trickster. It's funny because I don't really know of a lot of female trickster goddesses as much as men, as males, which is very interesting. But although
yeah.
I think Hermes may also not be wholly male. I think there may be some gender nuance there.
Okay.
Whole other whole other topic. Um, I have seen Hecate show up in my life, in my working life, as definitely a trickster, 100%, with a very wicked sense of humor. But I don't see her as much in that in mythology. So if, when people talk about unique personal gnosis as being, is that would be mine, is to say, I've experienced her as a trickster. In mythology, is she a trickster? I've not come across that. But I
Hmm.
have my own specific experiences with her as a trickster. So,
Do you have any stories that you can share? Now I'm
yes, they're both
curious.
naughty though. Do you want to hear them both?
Yeah, well, whatever
Okay.
you're comfortable sharing. Yeah.
Oh, I don't care. They're funny. So, um, this one makes me just laugh so hard. So this took place around, I guess it was 2012 with Hurricane Sandy, and we were doing I was doing a Halloween ritual with my coven, and it was one of the only ones that happened that because Sandy happened a few days before Halloween and Samhain and all of that. So we were one of the like two groups that were actually able to get a ritual happening because most of the spaces had no power, but we managed to get power on in one a speakeasy downtown. So we had our ritual. And um, we had a woman who wanted to embody. And typically, in previous years, I would go to the Bebero. I lived in New York City, so I'd go to the poulterer and have a chicken killed. And I would pray over it first, and the chicken would be killed. And then I'd take it home and cook it, and we would make it as an offering to Hecate. And the first slice would go to her, and everybody else would eat it. And then I would save the carcass, and I would make soup from it. And it was super healing broth. It was really beautiful. That year, we were not able to get a chicken killed because just too much going on, with hurricanes, stuff like that. And so I said to her, I'm really, really sorry about that. And I got the sense of, well, I'm going to get my piece one way or another. So we had a woman who embodied Hecate, and she stood there at the crossroads with the mask on throughout the ritual. And she was a hardcore vegan. Like, she's the one that sets the precedent where if she came to a space, even if she wasn't eating, she would then talk about being vegan if other people were serving food. So it was just
Mhm.
like vegan, 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 huge part of her identity. The next day, she gets on a train to go to DC. And while she's on the train, she feels a big bump under the train.
Mhm.
And she's like, oh my God, what was that? And the train stopped and said, we've hit a deer. We need to remove the carcass before we can continue.
Wow.
So she swears that the deer was under her car when they removed it. I don't know how true that was,
Hmm.
or how far the train can go over a deer, but Hecate is sometimes thought in a not direct connection, but a long connection with having some connection with the deer, perhaps because of her connection with Artemis. So to me, it was very funny on her part that
Hmm.
she would have the vegan be on the train that killed the
Yeah.
deer. That to me was pretty hilarious. And another time, At the time, I was doing a lot of work with trance prophecy, where someone would actually draw down the goddess into them, and then,
Hmm.
you know, to speak on her behalf. And we're doing this. We had one woman sit in the chair, and she was channeling from Hecate, and people were giving her gifts. And one woman gave her elderflowers. And while Hecate was in this woman, she was so tickled by the elderflowers, and she took them and she's rubbing them all over herself, and she's giggling and she's having so much fun. She's like, I love them, I love them, I love them, I love them. As soon as the ritual was over, we removed Hecate from this woman, and we're just kind of grounding and stuff like that. This woman's phone starts going off, and it was her F-boy. Her F-boy was like, I want to see you come downtown. And she's like, I'm going downtown. And so she gets on the subway, she goes downtown to see her F-boy, and I guess they had some really fabulous sex. And then after sex, the F-boy said to her, I've got some elderflower wine. Do you want some?
That is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Wow.
And she was like, yes, I
That's amazing. I have this conversation with my friends about like synchronicity and how sometimes like it can be hard to like get yourself to be like, is this a synchronicity? Is this not? But I feel like sometimes you get a sign like that and you're like, there's no question about it. And I love it when stuff like that happens.
Yeah, so she's very very funny, and she's shown up with me for some with some humor as well. So again, in mythology, is she a trickster? Haven't come across that. In my life, have I come across that? Absolutely. So you take your pick as to which one is true.
I love that too because I think that you sharing that story gives us permission to like maybe not take it so seriously all the time. Obviously, it can be serious and have serious aspects, but allowing it to be a little bit more of a like relationship where things can multiple truths can be truth at true at once, and it can be fun and it can be funny, and jokes like that can show up, and to lean into that and to be okay with that, because I see especially people who are very new, which I'm newer, there's a lot of fear mongering in the very beginning where like if you don't do this right, you're gonna be this is gonna happen to you. And I feel like hearing from somebody that yes, it can be funny, it can be fun, and jokes can exist, I think is really important for us to talk about.
This may be really helpful just based on what you've said, that you might find this helpful is I once heard somebody say, and I cannot remember who it is, so if this person's out there, let me know, but they said they treat, the gods like you would your grandmother's best friend. So you would be kind to her, you would be respectful to her, you would show up with a gift, and no matter what you give her, she's going to love. If you showed up you pick one flower and you bring it to your grandmother's best friend, she's going to call your grandma and say, guess who brought me a daisy? That sort of
Yeah.
thing. Or if you
Yeah.
buy her something very expensive, she might be like, ooh, you shouldn't have spent all this money on me, but I love it.
Hmm.
If you promise to mow her lawn every Saturday and you stop doing it after a while, she might not be pleased about that.
Hmm.
And if you come into her house and start smashing all of her precious moments dolls, she's going to be really mad. And then your grandmother is going to come kick your butt. Like that's the kind of thing. But also, if you go visit your grandmother's friend, she's going to have naughty jokes.
Yeah.
She's going to be funny. She's going to she's either she might play tricks on you, or she might help you play tricks on your grandma. Like there's that as well. So
Hmm.
yes, you approach these beings with respect and kindness and appreciation, and also understand they're going to be fun. But if there was something really serious, they'd be like your grandmother's best friend. If something really was going down and there was something dangerous happening, if the house is on fire, she's not going to think it's funny.
Yeah.
She's going to be like, get out. You know, if someone's hurting you, she's not going to think it's funny. She's gonna come rolling up with all of her nephews who are all angry, and they're gonna go, they're gonna come kick some butt. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing to remember. Same
Hmm.
thing for, so it's not, I think that is also a really helpful way for people to approach it. You're going to go see your grandmother's best friend. You're going to be on good behavior, but you're also not worried that you're not going to worry that you've got like judgment as soon as you walk in the door. She's glad you're there,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
use a coaster on her good cherry coffee table, for God's
Use the
sake.
coaster, yes.
Use the coaster, use good
Uh-huh.
manners, wipe your feet or take off your shoes or something like that. Use good manners, but you wouldn't be afraid of her, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yes, of
afraid of
course.
her for no reason. Like if you
I love
smashed
that
your precious,
illustration.
yeah,
Yeah.
you smashed your precious moment dolls, yeah, you might want to run. Like
I feel like what are people going to take away with this? If you work with Hekate, use a coaster.
Use a coaster. Use a coaster. You know, and
Um,
if you make, I think where people, the biggest mistake people can make is by saying that they're not, and I get people that fry me on both sides of this. It's like, if you make a promise to a deity, you have to come through. So
mhm,
keep your promises reasonable. You know, if you
mhm,
promise something enormous, you're a human being with a job. All of us are overwhelmed with our lives. Okay. So none of us have the ability to dedicate our entire life. I mean, there may be some people out there, but they're very few and far between and very lucky that can 24/7 devote a temple that is fully dedicated to Hecate. That doesn't exist for most of us. Most of
mhm.
us, we do what we can. But if you promise that you're going to do a 1 hour ritual every night and you don't because you get a week slammed at work, you get the flu, the dog gets the flu, the kid gets the flu, the 1 hour ritual isn't going to happen. The gods are not going to be pleased. They're not going to be pleased that you didn't come through. They're going to be pleased that you promised something you could not
Yeah,
fulfill,
I see.
right?
Hmm.
And that's also something that I've learned the hard way a few times. Um, so I always say under promise and over deliver.
Hmm.
You know, if it's say, I'm going to check in at my altar every day, and I'm not saying that's what I'm going to do, but if that's what you're going to do, then understand that it is okay if you just come and touch the altar and say, I'm here, but I got to go to bed, you know, and then
Hmm.
maybe there's another time in which you're going to have some more space and bandwidth. And I think also when you start out small, you find that you naturally build, you know, same thing as like with cooking. If you say, I'm going to cook a full course Thanksgiving dinner every single night, probably after 2 days you're going to quit because that's just like it's too much food, it's too much work. But you can
Hmm.
also say I commit to cooking every night, and sometimes that's just going to be heating up a can of soup, and sometimes it is going to be making a roast, but I'm still showing up in my kitchen every night. That's the approach to take with your magic. And sometimes your magic is going to be heating up a can of soup, and sometimes it's going to be doing a 5 course meal. It really, you know, but even those 5 course meals, you need to set time and planning and that kind of thing, and that's, treat your magic the same.
And I think that it could be really helpful too because you're going to build trust within yourself. Like, hey,
Mhm.
if we start small and like you said, under promise, over deliver, and we start a little bit smaller, hey, I am capable of this. Do I have space for more? Okay. And then you start, not only are you building trust with someone else, but you're building trust within yourself. And I think that that's really important to like also, what is this doing for myself as I continue this relationship? Because it should be beneficial in both ways. Maybe it won't be completely even all the time, but it should be beneficial to you as well. And building that trust within yourself and, hey, I can do this. And hey, I am capable of this.
Yeah. And the same, another metaphor is like when you decide you want to start getting more movement in your day. And at first it's like, I'm going to take a 10-minute walk after, you know, before I get start work, right?
Hmm.
And then at first it feels like a slog because you're like, oh, I have so much to do. How am I going to do this? But then you do it and then you start to crave it. And if you skip that walk, you don't feel as good.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I really need my walk. It's not just that I
Hmm.
have to. It's like I feel better when I take my 10-minute walk. And then I'm actually going to move it up to 15. I feel even better if I can get my 15-minute walk in. And suddenly a 10-minute walk isn't going to cut it anymore. And your
Hmm.
15-minute walk is what you start to crave, you know, because that's what you get used to. So,
So, what do you have coming up? What should we look forward from you? I do know that we are Justin the Witch of Enchantment. We're reading your Sacred Tears book. I'm very
yes.
excited for that. So, I'm going to be a part of that. What else are you blooming into right now?
So I just finished another manuscript, which I just sent off. Not quite ready to, I think we're not quite ready to announce what it is yet. It's very, very different than anything I've done before. And I really
Hmm.
enjoyed it. It was very, very different. And then gave myself a little bit of time off. I had some travel. I'm, you know, wrapping up some professional things and also some personal things. I'm going through some pretty big life transitions. And then I'm planning on there's two new projects I want to do, one of which I've been talking about with an editor, the other one which I am keeping completely up here for now because the moment I say I'm doing it, my life will turn upside down because that's what
Okay.
happens.
Yeah. Now I'm dying to know, but I'll be
I
patient.
know, I know. I said it once to someone and she went, "Oh my God." I went, "I know." And I'm not going to talk about it again until I'm ready. And
Mhm.
I've got my mind for it, but I just kind of given myself until Samhain to just kind of recalibrate. And
Mhm.
then I'm going to start working on the next piece, which will be more related to Sacred Tears.
Mhm.
And then the piece after that, that's going to be wild.
Okay, well, exciting things are coming. That
Thank
gives
you.
me that just only gets me excited and more curious, and that doesn't give me anything to work off of, but I will look forward to seeing what you're
Oh,
doing.
I am. Oh, so I should mention this now. I am starting, actually, I don't know when this is being released, but this coming Saturday, I'm starting
Mhm.
my 3-week Hecate and the Healing Journey class. So it's a 3-week virtual class, which is about like, embracing Hecate and embracing her mythology as a model and guide for a healing journey.
Okay.
So that starts this weekend, and you can find out information about that at my website, which is courtneyaweber.com.
Okay. And then I know that you're also on Instagram. It is going to be a little bit of time before this comes
Okay.
out, but we do have your website for future courses
Yes.
and classes and stuff like that. And then I know
Yes.
you're also on Instagram. Is there anywhere else that we should look for you?
I'm on TikTok. So I'm on TikTok and Instagram are the two places I'm most active. So and that's at Courtney A. Weber in both places. And most of my TikTok content I also post on Instagram, but not all of it. So if you're really, really liking what I do, I'd say follow me in both places.
Okay, yeah, I enjoy seeing you on your little walks. When you
Thank
go to
you.
the crossroad and you pick up trash and stuff, it's very cute. When
That
you were
was
talking about
fun.
walks earlier,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so
So
much for your time. I really
thank
appreciate
you.
your wisdom and all your energy, and I can't wait to see you again for all the things that you do, and also when I see you in person for presentations. If you guys have a chance to see Courtney Weber in a presentation, I highly put it at the top of your list because she's fantastic. So thank you so much, and have
Thank
a
you, Serena.
fantastic
You
day.
have a great
Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the Pomegranate Path. Interested in furthering your work, I make free worksheets that are on my Patreon, and the link is in the caption below. As always, may your path be sacred, your shadow sovereign, and may you always bloom wildly. Are you a symbol from Hekate? Are you a fierce warrior, wolf dog? Help navigate the underworld? Yeah.